Okay. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this event that's been organized by the Multicultural Students Affairs Office. Thank you very much, Ivan Ramirez, for being in charge of all the technical part of it. And also the Foreign Languages Department. I'm Alberto Villamandos. I'm the chair of the department. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Encarnación Arroyo. She is a professor at the Applied Foreign Languages Department at the University of Toulouse, Jaurès, and she's originally from the Basque Country in Spain, and her research interest, well, she's a researcher at the Octagon Lorda research team, which is focused on language acquisition and language learning as well. And so today she's going to be talking about bilingual education in the public system in Spain and France. And I think that's going to be a very interesting comparison also with what is happening in Kansas City in the area, because as you guys know, several of the public schools or the school district offers immersion programs, so bilingual programs in French and Spanish. So that's something that is very exciting, and for students, for parents and teachers as well. And I think it's going to be a very interesting comparison of what's the reality in Spain and France, and what the specifics of the situation here in Kansas City. So without further ado, Dr. Arroyo, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be able to talk to you today. I'm going to talk to you about bilingual education in France and Spain, a dialogue comparing language education in France with French and Occitan, and Spain with Spanish and Basque. Nola duzu izena. I let you guess in which language is this sentence. Nola duzu izena. No ideas? It's Basque. What's your name in Basque? So let's see some examples. Here you have Cursivas. Comment vas-tu? In French. Cursivas, it's Occitan. And as you can see, it's very near from French. Cursi, comment vas, vas-tu, the pronoun. And if we see the example in French, in Basque, ser modus, the same sentence, how are you? You have the translation in Spanish, ¿qué tal estás? And as you can see, it's really different. So we are going to compare two bilingual systems, educational systems, with here Occitan and French, and on the other hand, Basque and Spanish. But first of all, what's bilingualism? If someone can manage with two languages or more and use them frequently, this person is a bilingual person. How many bilinguals are there in the world? It's not a minority, because half of the world's population, if not more, is bilingual. For example, in USA, 23% of the total population is bilingual. And in Europe, 56% of the population across all European Union countries. So we are talking about a majority way of being of people. So I would like to show you how beneficial it is to be bilingual. So the first bilingualism benefit is that if you know 2 languages or more, it's much easier to learn another language. And you have a chance to be open-minded because you have to accept other cultures, other people, other traditions, so you become curious. But there are 3 other bilingualism benefits that are really very important for me, at least. And there are metalinguistic awareness, executive functions, and cognitive reserve. But what's that? Metalinguistic awareness, explicit knowledge about language, phonetics or syntax or semantics. This is really important in learning of writing and reading, even if in your mother tongue. I'm going to give to you an example. There are 3 sentences. You must say if they are on the right or on the wrong way. The first one, apples grow on trees. So, no answers? On the right way, obviously. The second one, grow trees on apples. No, everybody can see it's in a wrong way. And the third one, apples grow on flowers. On the wrong way or on the right way? Well, we can say that it's on the right way, but it doesn't mean anything. So if you can say that, you are dissociating meaning and structure. Structure is all right, but meaning it's no sense. So a part of the brain helps us to keep attention on the focus, even if something is pulling us on a wrong way. And we know nowadays that metalinguistic awareness helps brain to think like that, to keep attention on a focus, even if you have something that says to you that is pulling you in a wrong way. Another bilingualism benefit is executive functions. What's that? It's a very highly valued system. As you know, language is very intense and needs broad brain networks and cognitive systems. And you have cognitive processes as attention, we have just seen it, working memory, and another one, inhibition, because both languages are always active to some degree. You have to make a choice between 2 languages when you are bilingual. So the 2 questions bilinguals have to ask themselves, often subconsciously when communicating with others, are which language should be used? Should the other language be brought in? So brain is working every time. You have to make choices. And the last one is about cognitive reserve. We know that neuronal plasticity keeps a healthy mind, and cognitive reserve slows cognitive decline. And we can get cognitive reserve by bilingualism. when bilinguals become dementia patients, they are able to continue the functions because they have resources in reserve that allow to continue the cognitive level.
It was yesterday. It was with this girl. Sounds like a...
Sounds is that okay? Okay. As we know that cognitive performance improves with musical training, sport, higher education, high active lifestyles, and also with bilingualism. So bilingual education systems are really important in our lives. That's why I'm going to show you two bilingual systems. The first one is a bilingual educational system in Occitania, where I live. It's in the south of France, and some schools are in Occitan and in French. The other one is in Basque, Euskera, Basque and Spanish in the Basque Country in the north of Spain. Let's see some questions about French language. There is one single official language in France, which is French, and education is used as an instrument of implement monolingualism. French language contributes to the unity of France, and regional languages use is considered as a sign of social regression, even if nowadays it's changing, the situation is changing. But there are some regional languages in France, not official languages, but regional languages. You have here Occitan in the south, in this region. And then you have French in the whole country, Breton in the northwest of the country, Basque in the southwest of the country and in a part of Spain, Catalan in the southeast of the country and in a part of Spain also. And then you have French Provençal, and then here Alsatian in the border with Germany, Francic here, and Flamand here, just near Netherlands and Belgium. And at last you have Corse language, which is spoken in Corsica Island. And what about the number of speakers of our regional languages? Let's see just for Occitan, Languedoc, Occitan. There are 600,000 speakers in Occitanie. And the total population is 6 million. So we have 10% of the population who speaks Occitan. What about Occitan language? It's a Romance language, as French or Spanish or Italian, Catalan, Portuguese, and so on. And since the 10th century to the 15th, it was a language of culture in the south of France. But since the 16th century, French language was used for writing, even if oral communication was mainly in Occitan in the south of France. And in the last century, in 1964, regional languages in instruction were rejected. So the only language allowed in schools was French. What about regional languages teaching? We have about 25,000 students who receive an education in Occitan, just some hours per week or in immersion schools. But as you can see, there are two choices. There are public schools with two models. The first one is half of instruction in French and half in Occitan. And it concerns about 4,000 children. The other one is just 3 hours of Occitan language as a foreign language, and it concerns about 20,000 children. And on the other hand, we have the private schools, which propose immersion schools, immersion education, and it concerns 3,000 children in Occitania. These schools are called calandreta. But what is an immersion school? It's a method of foreign language instruction, and the foreign language is the medium of teaching regular curriculum. The foreign language is not the subject of instruction. And the main goals of immersion education are developing a high level of proficiency in the foreign language, and also developing positive attitudes toward those who speak the foreign language and toward their cultures. So it concerns language and culture. Calandreta is an immersion school in Occitan language, as I have said. It's a secular school, private, with a private initiative by an association where teachers and parents are involved. Some French lessons per week, and students are from 3 to 14 years old. It was founded 42 years ago, and the aim is to save and transmit the Occitan language, offering an early total immersion program. Let's see something else about curriculum. Contents are taught in Occitan in Calandreta schools. Even reading and writing learning is in Occitan, and afterwards in French. There is an openness to other Romance languages as French, Spanish, Italian, with a comparative approach in monomorphosyntax, vocabulary, and grammar in general. So metalinguistic awareness is used here. And what about pedagogy? Pedagogy is based on one teacher, one language principle, which is easier for students to associate one language with one person. Pedagogy is focused on the individual development as autonomy, creativity, in order to have open-minded children. Let's see some examples in Occitan. As you can see here, you have, he asks me to sing. Me demando que cante, it's Occitan, and French, il me demande de chanter. As you can see, it's very near. Me demande que de canter, chanter. The other example for Occitan is vols que porte des lunettes? Tu veux que je porte des lunettes? Vols, tu veux, que, porte, de lunettes. Do you want me to wear glasses? So as you can see, it's really near. What's about Basque and Spanish? In Basque, we will say, abesteko eskatzen dit, to say he asks me to sing. And in Spanish, me pide que cante. So, abesteko is to sing, eskatzen, he asks, and dit is he, third person, and me also. So as you can see, the order is very, very different, and vocabulary also. Nahi duzu nik betaurrekoak eramatea? Do you want me to wear glasses? And in Spanish, we will say, ¿Quieres que lleve gafas? So nahi is want, duzu is the auxiliary verb, nik, me, betaurrekoak, glasses, and eramatea, wear, to wear. So as you can see, we can't understand. So let's see what's going on with regional languages in Spain. All Spanish autonomous communities have reserved legislative power in some areas. And one of these areas is education. So the Spanish autonomous communities can adapt their own rules on education. And all the 6 communities with their own language can offer education in this language. And as you can see here on the map, you have Galician in the northwest of Spain, and then Basque in the north here, and there is a part of Navarre also, and a part of France with Basque. Catalan is spoken in Catalonia and in the south of France, and in Valence and in Balear Islands. Basque, what's going on with Basque? Euskera in Basque. Euskera, so Basque, it has a co-official language status in the Basque country. And there are 750,000 native Basque speakers with a population of 2 million of inhabitants. Basque is a minority language spoken by only 28% of the population, and 16% are passive bilinguals. The Basque language is the only non-Indo-European language in Western Europe. As you saw, it's completely different from French or from Spanish. Now, I'd like to show some models of Basque language education. There is model A with all subjects where all subjects are in Spanish except for Basque, which is taught 4 or 5 hours a week. Model B, both languages are used as languages of instruction for 50% of the school time. And then model D, because C doesn't exist in Basque. So model B and model D. Basque is the language of instruction, and Spanish is taught as a subject for 4 or 5 hours a week. And these schools with immersion language is called Ecastella. So Ecastella is an immersion school in Basque. It was founded in 1920, but it was forbidden during the almost all the time of the dictator until 1975. But in 1916, Ecastella, this immersion school in Basque, were expanding all over the Basque country. So there were they were clandestine schools, and Basque language was banished at school, even punished. That's the same thing in Calandretas, in Occitania. Occitan language was banished at school, but people at home spoke this language. So at this time, it was the same thing for Basque. And there are two possibilities of Ecastella. There are public schools and private schools, but privately owned, but state-funded schools. So they, even if they are private, they receive money from public statements. What about the number of schools in different bilingual systems of education? As you can see here, almost every student go to Model D, public school or private schools. And it's a minority who goes to schools with half and a half language education or just a few hours of Basque. In public schools, Model A is the one who has the lower number of children. It's the model just with a few hours of Basque. And students have a low sociocultural level. Their origins are immigrant, and they have poor academic results, particularly in linguistic skills in Basque. It's we can understand that because a few hours per week with a language to learn a language which is very different is not enough. And this model, as you can see here, should disappear in the future. Model D, half, Model B, half and half, receive a number of students which is decreasing. Their level in Basque language is low, and also it should disappear. And what about the immersion school, Model D? Everything in Basque and just a few lessons of Spanish per week. Model D is the mainstay of public education. Most of educational centers are Model D, so immersion schools. And they receive all socio-professional category and all origins students. This model keeps on expanding, and which is more important for me is that academic results are higher than in Model A and B, not only for language, for Basque language skills, but for everything. And nowadays, these centers receive native and non-native families. So families who speak Basque or not. So there is a huge diversity of students. And what about private schools? As for the public school, this model the model with just a few lessons of Basque per week is decreasing. And families are very, very diverse. There is a lot of diversity of social, professional level of the families. In the private schools, Model B, with half of instruction in Basque and half in Spanish, is a little bit more important than in public schools. Family are from high socio-professional level, mainly Spanish speakers families, and the skills in Euskera in Basque are very low. A third of pupils of private schools go to Model B. And what about Model D, though? So immersion school is the most important model in private schools, as it was for public schools. And families are high socio-professional level. 37% of families are native speakers. And we can see here also high linguistic skills in Basque, but also in mathematics and Spanish, which is quite relevant. And if we see the whole system, private and public education, we can see that a half of students go to private schools and the other half to public schools. Model D, which are immersion schools, is the most expanded, especially in public Ecastella, in public schools. And for me, the most important information is that students who receive an immersion education in Basque have higher level skills in mathematics, in Spanish, and in Basque. So being in an immersion school doesn't mean that you have a lower level in mathematics or another subject. And now, if we compare Occitan and Basque, we can see that there are more speakers of Basque in the Basque country than in Occitania. The same thing for students. There are more students who learn Basque than Occitan. And which is curious is that in the Basque country, they can have public or private immersion schools, but not in France, because Constitution doesn't allow to have an immersion school in another language than French. For me, as I said, results are, I'd like to highlight results, because higher level of academic skills in immersion are gotten in immersion schools. So we're going to conclude. Bilingualism benefits are considerable, as we said. Immersion programs are a way of becoming bilingual and of having good academic skills. But I'd like to tell you about some case for immersion programs. Political resources are essential to promote bilingual education. The results of bilingual education can only be positive if both community languages are valorized by the environment as well as by the child, and they have to get community and parental support. But which is very, very important, it's necessary to have qualified teachers, as for example, you are students of languages, of education. You can contribute to have bilingual schools and to get more and more students bilingual. Je vais parler un tout petit peu en français puisqu'il y a des étudiants en français. Et comme nous avons vu, il y a énormément de bénéfices d'être bilingue, l'ouverture aux autres, la conscience métalinguistique, les fonctions exécutives, la réserve cognitive pour la vieillesse. Así que ahora paso al español. Hagamos un esfuerzo y todo lo posible, todo lo que está en nuestras manos para conseguir que haya más alumnos bilingües y más gente bilingüe en nuestra proximidad. So, you are able to get more and more bilinguals in your around you because you are specialists, and I will highlight the invitation of Alberto Villamandos, who is a specialist of literature, but he's aware about bilingualism importance. So thank you very much for inviting me here today. And eskerrik asko, gracias, merci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arroyo, for this great presentation. I think it becomes very clear the importance of political power or political weight when it comes to implement some type of curriculum in a minority language, right? When you have power, regional political power in a, you can create a whole curriculum. You can protect those minority languages. I think that's very interesting. Is there any questions or comments from the attendants? So we have one. Can they understand each other even they speak those different languages? For example, Catalan versus Basque?
Catalan versus Basque, no, it's not possible. But Catalan versus Occitan is possible because they are really, really very near languages. So here in Toulouse, I live in Toulouse, which is the town, the biggest town in Occitania. Catalan people from Spain, for example, can speak to people here in Occitan, and there is no problem of communication. Between Basque and Spanish is not possible. With Basque is a language really a very different language. So structure is inversed almost always, and they are declinations, and vocabulary is really very different from French, Spanish, Catalan, and so on. But Catalan, for example, with Italian people, they can more or less understand each other, and Spanish and Italian more or less also. I don't know if there are more questions.
Can you speak about teacher education programs at the universities in Spain and France for Basque and Occitan teaching? Like,
and
like I believe, we were talking about that before, that you teach classes, you teach classes part of a master's to train future teachers, right? Of
yes.
Spanish, I believe. So what kind of certification or what kind of training future teachers they need to go through?
Hmm. So yeah, here in our university, I teach to students which are preparing um, opposition
Yes, like a public exam, I guess, right? Mm-hmm.
as a public exam to become teacher in education. So they have learn to have university instruction with a master, and afterwards they have to pass an exam, a public exam. Here in my university, Université Toulouse Jean Jaurès, they can learn Occitan. It's literature and language, Occitan language also. And in Spain is the same thing. They have to learn language and literature to become teachers, and they have to get an exam with a very high level of language, even for levels, low levels for children, students, I don't know, in primary schools. So because it's a really different language, so it's not very easy to speak in Basque. So level required is a high level. But there are a lot of possibility of studying Basque in schools for adults, in summer schools, and so on. In here in Occitanie, there are schools like that, but a very few schools, because government, regional education is it's government, French government, who orders everything in every region. It's and in Spain, no. In Spain, autonomies communities have power about education, so it's quite different.
Mm-hmm. There's another question. How about the motivation on the part of young speakers? How to get them motivated? What difference do you see regarding motivation? Perhaps opportunities for use between Catalan and Basque, or I mean Occitan. I'm thinking also. I mean, my experience. I remember seeing how, especially in Basque, children literature is really big. Like there's a huge investment in children materials, like even the public television, the cartoons. They would get the latest cartoon and they would attract all these young speakers. So I think there was a lot of resources for young or children's literature to kind of get them interested and motivated. Um, what about what's your perspective on that? They had to get
Yeah. It's easier in the Basque country to have Basque material and support in Basque. As you said, you can watch television in Basque, radios, newspapers, a lot of material and support for school, because politics was to expand Basque. As it was forbidden during the dictator. Afterwards, it was on the other side. people wanted to preserve the language. In Occitanie, it's a little bit different because there is no so much money for resources. So there is just radio possibility on a radio a few hours per week to hear Occitan, and in television it's just a few programs, but it's really different, the situation. And here in Occitanie, people in general doesn't matter about Occitan. It's not very expanded. In the Basque country or in Catalonia, in Spain or in Galicia, it's much, people are more motivated to speak the language, the regional language. Yeah, mentality is completely different. Yeah. Even if here in Occitania, there is a group of persons who are struggling for having more support and public money and opening schools. So, but it's a minority, really a minority, very strong, but a minority.
Do you, I mean, I don't know about the, the political landscape in Occitanie, but are there regional political parties that are especially supportive of those languages, or the big national parties, when it comes to Occitanie, they have an emphasis on those languages? Because I think that then you have, like, I'm thinking in the Basque country, in Catalonia, then you have that translate into a public discussion about identity and the importance of language. So I don't know if in France is something similar when it comes to the regional, at the regional level.
In France, every party is a national party. So nowadays, it's true that some of them are enhancing regional languages and regional culture, and sometimes there is one person designated to the culture of the region, and it's very well perceived to have somebody who claims for regional language, for regional culture, but just it's not a real party. So it's really different. For example, we receive a newspaper from the region, and there is one article in Occitan, and the rest of the review or newspaper is in French. So, and in the Basque country or in Catalonia, every document, every public document is translated into Catalan and into Spanish or into Basque and into Spanish. Bilingual documents, always. Public documents are always bilingual, and not here now.
Any more questions or comments? I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, we live in a very different situation here when it comes to bilingual programs, because of course there's not, I mean, there's a political element to it, but it has a very different dynamic, right? So, but yeah, very interesting.
One thing I thought was interesting when I was doing research in this area is to see the role of the European Union, which has a really strong promotion of the minority languages, which I think perhaps has done an even better job of bringing it to the limelight than France itself. You know, so, hey, all of Europe, lift these up rather than pushing them down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a change like some decades ago about, you know, from Europe of the countries to Europe of the people, meaning the peoples, right?
Yes.
So it was a more local type of perspective of focus instead of at the state level. Yeah, because that's always the discussion, state and nations, right? Like that's, you know, that's a completely different.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because here we just look at what is going on here, but it's very, very interesting to know what's going on in other countries in America or in United States, the differences. But I think a very important difference is the status of language. For example, in the Basque Country, during some years, it was people were very proud of going to an immersion school in Basque, because Basque had a very high I don't know how to say, it was very well seen to go to received to go to go speak Basque, because there were a lot of immigrants from other regions, from the center of Spain, the south of Spain. They went to the Basque Country or to Catalonia or to Madrid in 1960s, 70s to get a work. So regional languages became very important languages with a great status. So I think it's a really important how the language is perceived by people.
And something that you know that we always tell our students, the students who speak several languages, is that, you know, student language are like a sport. You need to keep training. So even if you think you speak the language, you still need to take some classes, right? You need to refresh that, right? So here we have heritage speakers of Spanish, for instance. And we have heritage speakers of Arabic and heritage speakers of Chinese. So it's a different, so they speak the language or they understand the language in at home, right, with their family, but they don't have an academic, they don't take classes, or they take very few classes in the target language. So it's a different situation where, you know, the oral skills are really good, but maybe not so much the spelling, or maybe their writing, or the, you know, they don't read in the language. So it's a you know, it's always good, you know, I always tell them that you need to keep practicing and to keep it alive for the next generation, because usually, you know, there's a lot of attrition eventually, right? So, you know, when moving on to the next generation. So
yeah,
interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Arroyo. It's you were telling me that it was, well, it must be now 8 p.m. in France right now, right?
Yeah, it's true.
It's dinner time.
Dinner time.
But...
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I was delighted of being here with you today.
Thank you very much. Merci. And thank you everybody for being here as well.
Bye.
Bye.